Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has therefore instructed us, Trinadapi sunichena todor iva suhishnuna amanina manadina kirtaniya sadahari. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. Unless one is meek and humble, to make progress in spiritual life is very difficult. Text number 9. Manyedana bijana rupa tapashutaujas teja prabhava balapaurusha buddha yoga Naradanaya hipavanti parasya pumso bhaktya tutosha bhagavanga jagyutapaya. Prahlada Maharaj continued, one may possess wealth, an aristocratic family, beauty, austerity, education, sensory expertise, luster, influence, physical strength, diligence, intelligence, and mystic power. But I think that even by all these qualifications, one cannot satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. However, one can satisfy the Lord simply by devotional service. Gajendra did this, and thus the Lord was satisfied with him. Purport. No kind of material qualification is the means for satisfying the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, only by devotional service can the Lord be known. Bhaktyamam abhijanati, Bhagavad Gita 18:55. Unless the Lord is pleased by the service of a devotee, the Lord does not reveal himself. Naham prakasha sarvasya yogamaya samavrita, Bhagavad Gita 7:25. This is the verdict of all Shastras. Neither by speculation nor by material qualifications can one understand or approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text number 10. Viprad vishadguna yutada davinda naba padada vinda vimukachapachambarishtam manyeta darpatamano vachanehi tarta pranam punati sakulam natapuri manaha. If a Brahmana has all 12 of the Brahminical qualifications, as they are stated in the book called Sanat Sujata, but is not a devotee and is averse to the lotus feet of the Lord, he is certainly lower than a devotee who is a dog eater, but who has dedicated everything, mind, words, activities, wealth, and life, to the Supreme Lord. Such a devotee is no better than a Brahmana, because the devotee can purify his whole family, whereas the so-called Brahmana, in a position of false prestige, cannot purify even himself. Purport. Here's a statement by Prahlada Maharaj, one of the 12 authorities, regarding the distinction between a devotee and a Brahmin expert in karma kanda, or Vedic ritualistic ceremonies. There are 4 varnas and 4 ashramas, which divide human society. But the central principle is to become a first-class pure devotee. It is said in the Hari Bhakti Sudodaya, Bhagavad Bhaktihinasya Jati Shastram Japa Tapa Apranasya Dehasya Mandanam Lokaranjanam. If one is born in a high family, like that of a Brahmana, Kshatriya, or Vaishya, but is not a devotee of the Lord, all his good qualifications as a Brahmana, Kshatriya, or Vaishya are null and void. Indeed, they are considered decorations of a dead body. In this verse, Prahlada Maharaj speaks of the Vipras, the learned Brahmanas. The learned Brahmana is considered best among the divisions of Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. But a devotee born in a low Chandal family is better than such Brahmanas, not to speak of the Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and others. A devotee is better than anyone, for he is in the transcendental position on the Brahman platform. Mam jayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan brahmabhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, who does not fall down in any circumstance, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. Bhagavad Gita 14:26. The 12 qualities of a first-class Brahmana are stated in the book called Sanat Sujata as follows. Jnanam cha satyam cha dhamma shautram cha yamatsaryam hris titikshanan suya anusuya yagnascha danam cha driti shamascha mahavrata dvadasha ramanasya. The European and American devotees in the Krishna consciousness movement are sometimes accepted as Brahmanas, but the so-called caste Brahmanas are very much envious of them. In answer to such envy, Prahlada Maharaja says that one who has been born in a Brahmin family but is falsely proud of his prestigious position cannot purify himself, cannot even purify himself, not to speak of his family. Whereas if a Chandala, a low-born person, is a devotee and is fully surrendered unto the lotus feet of the Lord, he can purify his entire family. We have had actual experience of how Americans and Europeans, because of their full Krishna consciousness, have purified their whole families, so much so that a mother of a devotee at the time of her death inquired about Krishna with her last breath. Therefore, it is theoretically true and has been practically proven that a devotee can give the best service to his family, his community, his society, and his nation. The foolish accuse a devotee of following the principles of escapism, but actually the fact is that a devotee is the right person to elevate his entire family. A devotee engages everything in the service of the Lord, and therefore he is always exalted. Naivatmana prabhurayam nijalabha purno manam janada vidusa karuno vranite yad yajjano bhagavate vidadhita manam tachatmane pratimukasiyata mukashri. The Supreme Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is always fully satisfied in himself. Therefore, when something is offered to him, the offering by the Lord's mercy is for the benefit of the devotee. For the Lord does not need service from anyone. To give an example, if one's face is decorated, the reflection of one's face in a mirror is also seen to be decorated. Purport. In Bhakti Yoga, it is recommended that a devotee follow 9 principles: Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Pada Sevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atma, Nivedanam. Bhagavatam 7:5-23. This service of glorifying the Lord by hearing, chanting, and so on is not, of course, meant for the benefit of the Lord. This devotional service is recommended for the benefit of the devotee. The Lord is always glorious, whether the devotee glorifies him or not. But if the devotee engages in glorifying the Lord, the devotee himself automatically becomes glorious. Cheto darpanam marjanam pavamahadavagni nirvapanam. Chaitanya Charitamrita Antya 20.12. By glorifying the Lord constantly, the living entity becomes purified in the core of his heart. And thus he can understand that he does not belong to the material world, but is the spirit soul whose actual activity is to advance in Krishna consciousness so that he may become free from the material clutches. Thus, the blazing fire of material existence is immediately extinguished. Bhava mahadavagni nirvapanam. A foolish person is amazed that Krishna orders sarva dharman parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja. Bhagavad Gita 18:66. Abandon all varieties of religious activities and just surrender unto me. Some foolish scholars even say that this is too much to demand. But this demand is not for the benefit of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Rather, it is for the benefit of human society. If human beings individually and collectively surrender everything to the Supreme Personality of Godhead in full Krishna consciousness, all of human society will benefit. One who does not dedicate everything to the Supreme Lord is described in this verse as a vidusha, a rascal. In Bhagavad Gita 7:15, the Lord himself speaks in the same way. Namam dushkritinumudha prapadyante naradama mayaya pritagyana asuram bhavamashrita. Those miscreants who are grossly foolish, lowest among mankind whose knowledge is stolen by illusion, and who partake of the atheistic nature of demons, do not surrender unto me. Because of ignorance and misfortune, the atheists and the Naradamas, the lowest of men, do not surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, although the Supreme Lord Krishna is full in himself, he appears in different yugas to demand the surrender of the conditioned souls so that they will benefit by becoming free from the material clutches. In conclusion, the more we engage in Krishna consciousness and render service unto the Lord, the more we benefit. Krishna does not need service from any of us. Tasmadaham vigata biklaka ishvarasya sarvatmanam mahikranami yatamanisham nicho jaya guna visargam anupravishta nicho jaya guna visargam anupravishta puyeta yena hi puman anuvarnitena. Therefore, although I was born in a demoniac family, I may without a doubt offer prayers to the Lord with full endeavor, as far as my intelligence allows. Anyone who has been forced by ignorance to enter the material world may be purified of material life if he offers prayers to the Lord and hears the Lord's glories. Purport. It is clearly understood that a devotee does not need to be born in a very high family, to be rich, to be aristocratic, or to be very beautiful. None of these qualifications will engage one in devotional service. With devotion, one should feel, God is great and I am very small. Therefore, my duty is to offer my prayers to the Lord. Only on this basis can one understand and render service to the Lord, as the Lord says in Bhagavad Gita 18:55. Bhaktya mam vijanati yavan yashchasmi tatvataha tatumam tatvato gyatva vishite tadanantaram. One can understand the Supreme Personality as he is only by devotional service. And when one is in full consciousness of the Supreme Lord by such devotion, he can enter into the kingdom of God. Thus Prahlada Maharaj decided to offer his best prayers to the Lord without consideration of his material position. Sarvehyami vidikarastava satvadamno brahmadayo vayami veshana cho vijanta shemaya bhutai utatma sukaya chasya vikriditam bhagavato ruchiravatarai vikriditam bhagavato ruchiravatarai. O my Lord, all the demigods headed by Lord Brahma are sincere servants of your Lordship, who are situated in a transcendental position. Therefore, they are not like us, Prahlada and his father, the demon Hiranyakashipu. Your appearance in this fearsome form is your pastime for your own pleasure. Such an incarnation is always meant for the protection and improvement of the universe. Purport. Prahlada Maharaj wanted to assert that his father and the other members of his family were all unfortunate because they were demoniac, Whereas the devotees of the Lord are always fortunate because they are always ready to follow the orders of the Lord. When the Supreme Lord appears in this material world in his various incarnations, he performs two functions: saving the devotee and vanquishing the demon. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya chaduskritam. Bhagavad Gita 4.8. Lord Nrsingadev, for example, appeared for the protection of his devotee. Such pastimes as those of Nrsingadev are certainly not meant to create a fearful situation for the devotees. But nonetheless, the devotees, being very simple and faithful, were afraid of the fierce incarnation of the Lord. Therefore, Prahlada Maharaj, in the following prayer, requests the Lord to give up his anger. Text 14. Tad yachamanyam ashurashchahatastvajaya modeta sadarapi vrishchika sarpahatya lokashta nivritamita pratiyanti sarve Rupam Nrsinga Vibhayaya Janasmaranti. Rupam Nrsinga Vibhayaya Janasmaranti. My Lord Nrsingadev, please, therefore, cease your anger now that my father, the great demon Hiranyakashipu, has been killed. Since even saintly persons take pleasure in the killing of a scorpion or a snake, all the worlds have achieved great satisfaction because of the death of this demon. Now they are confident of their happiness, and they will always remember your auspicious incarnation in order to be free from fear. Purport. The most important point in this verse is that although saintly persons never desire the killing of any living entity, they take pleasure in the killing of envious living entities like snakes and scorpions. Hiranyakashipu was killed because he was worse than a snake or a scorpion, and therefore everyone was happy. Now there was no need for the Lord to be angry. The devotees can always remember the form of Nrsingadev when they are in danger, and therefore the appearance of Nrsingadev was not at all inauspicious. The Lord's appearance is always worshipable and auspicious for all sane persons and devotees. Text 15. Naham babem yajita te taranabhakasya Naham babem yajita te tabayanakasya Jivarka netra prukutiras pasogradam strat Antras rajashratata keshara shankukarnan Nirada Pita Digibad Aribinakagrad Nirada Pita Digibad Aribinakagrad. My Lord, who are never conquered by anyone, I am certainly not afraid of your ferocious mouth and tongue, your eyes bright like the sun, or your frowning eyebrows. I do not fear your sharp pinching teeth, your garland of intestines, your mane soaked with blood, or your high wedge-like ears. Nor do I fear your tumultuous roaring, which makes elephants flee to distant places, or your nails, which are meant to kill your enemies. Purport. Lord Nrsingadev's fierce appearance was certainly most dangerous for the non-devotees. But for Prahlada Maharaj, such a fearful appearance was not at all disturbing. The lion is very fearsome for other animals, but its cubs are not at all afraid of the lion. The water of the sea is certainly dreadful for all living entities on the land, but within the sea even the small fish is unafraid. Why? Because the small fish has taken shelter of the big ocean. It is said that although great elephants are taken away by the flooding waters of the river, the small fish swim opposite the current. Therefore, although the Lord sometimes assumes a fierce appearance to kill the Duskritis, the devotees worship him. Keshavadrita Narahari Rupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare. The devotee always takes pleasure in worshiping the Lord and glorifying the Lord in any form either pleasing or fierce. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We're continuing our reading of Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 9, text number 20. Yasmin yato yarhiyena cha yasya yasmad yasma yata yaduta yastva para parova bhava karoti vikaroti pratakso bhava sanchoditastadakilam bhavatasvarupam yasmin yato yarhiyena cha yasya yasmad Yasma yata yaduta yastva para parova bhava karoti vikaroti pratuksa bhava sanchoditastadakilam bhavatasvarupam sanchoditastadakilam bhavatasvarupam. My dear Lord, everyone in this material world is under the modes of material nature, being influenced by goodness, passion, and ignorance. Everyone from the greatest personality, Lord Brahma, down to the small ant, works under the influence of these modes. Therefore, everyone in this material world is influenced by your energy. The cause for which they work, the place where they work, the time when they work, the matter due to which they work. The goal of life they have considered final, and the process for obtaining this goal, all are nothing but manifestations of your energy. Indeed, since the energy and the energetic are identical, all of them are but manifestations of you. Purport. Whether one thinks himself protected by his parents, by the government, by some place, or by some other cause, everything is due to the various potencies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Everything that is done, whether in the higher, middle, or lower planetary systems, is due to the supervision or control of the Supreme Lord. It is therefore said, Karmana Dayavane Trena Jantur Deho Papataye, Srimad Bhagavatam 3.31.1. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Super Soul within the core of everyone's heart, gives inspiration for action according to one's mentality. All of these mentalities are merely facilities given by Krishna to the person acting. Bhagavad Gita therefore says, Matak smritir jnana mapohanam cha. Bhagavad Gita 15:15. Everyone works according to the inspiration given by the Super Soul. Because everyone has a different goal of life, everyone acts differently, as guided by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The words Yasmin yato yarhiyena cha yasya yasmad indicate that all activities, whatever they may be, are but different features of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. All of them are created by the living entity and fulfilled by the mercy of the Lord. Although all such activities are non-different from the Lord nevertheless directs Sarvadharman Parityaja Mamekam Sharanam Braja. Give up all other duties and surrender unto me. When we accept this direction from the Lord, we can actually become happy. As long as we work according to our material senses, we're in material life. But as soon as we act according to the real transcendental direction of the Lord, our position is spiritual. The activities of bhakti, devotional service, are directly under the control of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Narada Pancharatra states, Sarvapadi manir muktam taparatvena nirmalam Hrishikena Hrishikesha Sevanam Bhaktiruchate. When one gives up materially designated positions and works directly under the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one's spiritual life is revived. This is described as Sarupena Avastati, being situated in one's original constitutional position. This is the real description of mukti, or liberation from material bondage. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Are you feeling satisfied? That means you're pure devotees. If this satisfies you, then you're the luckiest people on the planet. Text 21. Maya mana srijita karma mayam baliya kalena chodita gunanu matina pumsa chando mayam yadachayarpita surasharam samsara chakram ajakoti taritwadanya samsara chakram ajakoti taritwadanya. O Lord, O Supreme Eternal, by expanding your plenary portion, you have created the subtle bodies of the living entities through the agency of your external energy, which is agitated by time. Thus the mind entraps the living entity in unlimited varieties of desires to be fulfilled by the Vedic directions of karma kanda, fruit of activity, and the 16 elements. Who can get free from this entanglement unless he takes shelter at your lotus feet? Purport: if the hand of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is present in everything, where is the question of being liberated from material engagement to spiritual blissful life? Indeed, it is a fact that Krishna is the source of everything, as we understand from Krishna himself in Bhagavad Gita, Aham Sarvasya Prabhava. All the activities in both the spiritual and material world are certainly conducted by the orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead through the agency of either the material or spiritual nature. As further confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Mayadhyakshena Prakriti Suyate Sacharacharam. Without the direction of the Supreme Lord, material nature cannot do anything. It cannot act independently. Therefore, in the beginning, the living entity wanted to enjoy the material energy and to give the living entity all facility. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of God, had created this material world and gave the living entity the facility to concoct different ideas and plans through the mind. These facilities offered by the Lord to the living entity constitute the 16 kinds of perverted support in terms of the knowledge-gathering senses, the working senses, the mind, and the 5 material elements. The wheel of repeated birth and death is created by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but to direct the bewildered living entity in progress toward liberation according to varied stages of advancement, different directions are given in the Vedas, Chandomayam. If one wants to be elevated to the higher planetary systems, he may follow the Vedic directions. As the Lord states in Bhagavad Gita, Yanti Deva Vrata Devan, Pitrin Yanti Patir Vrata, Bhutani Yanti Bhuteja, Yanti Mad Yajinopi Mam. Those who worship the demigods will take birth among the demigods. Those who worship ghosts and spirits will take birth among such beings. Those who worship ancestors go to the ancestors, and those who worship me will live with me. The real purpose of the Vedas is to direct one back home, back to Godhead. But the living entity, not knowing the real goal of his life, wants to go sometimes here and sometimes there, and do sometimes this and sometimes that. In this way, he wanders throughout the entire universe, imprisoned in various species and thus engaging in various activities for which he must suffer the reactions. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu therefore says, Brahmanda Brahmate Kun Bhagyavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasadi Pai Bhakti Lata Bij. The fallen conditioned living entity, trapped by the external energy, loiters in the material world. But if by good fortune he meets a bona fide representative of the Lord, who gives him the seed of devotional service, and he takes advantage of such a guru, or representative of God, he receives the Bhakti Lata Bij, the seed of devotional service. If he properly cultivates Krishna consciousness, he is then gradually elevated to the spiritual world. The ultimate conclusion is that one must surrender to the principles of Bhakti Yoga, for then one will gradually attain liberation. No other method of liberation from the material struggle is at all possible. Text 22. Satvam hi nitya vichitatma guna sadamna kalo vashikrita vrashrijya vasarga shakti chakre vrashishnamajayeshvara shrurashare nishpidyamanam upakarshya vibho prapannam nishpidyamanam upakarshya vibho prapannam. My dear Lord, O Supreme Great, you have created this material world of 16 constituents, but you are transcendental to their material qualities. In other words, these material qualities are under your full control, and you are never conquered by them. Therefore, the time element is your representation. My Lord, O Supreme, no one can conquer you. As for me, however, I am being crushed by the wheel of time, and therefore I surrender fully unto you. Now kindly take me under the protection of your lotus feet. Purport. The wheel of material miseries is also a creation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he is not under the control of the material energy. Rather, he is the controller of the material energy, whereas we, the living entities, are under its control. When we give up our constitutional position, Jivara Swarupoi Krishnera Nityadas, the Supreme Personality of Godhead creates this material energy and her influence over the conditioned soul. Therefore, he is the Supreme, and only he can deliver the conditioned soul from the onslaught of material nature. Mam eva ye prapadyante mayam eva, mayam etam tarantite. Maya, the external energy, continuously imposes upon the conditioned souls the suffering of the threefold miseries of this material world. Therefore, in the previous verse, Prahlada Maharaj prayed to the Lord, "But for your lordship, no one can save me." Prahlada Maharaj has also explained that a child's protectors, his parents, cannot save the child from the onslaught of birth and death. Nor can medicine and a physician save one from death, nor can a boat or similar means of protection save a person drowning in the water. For everything is controlled by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, suffering humanity must surrender to Krishna, as Krishna himself demands in the last instruction of Bhagavad Gita 1866. Sarva dharman parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja aham tvang sarva papebhyo mokshaishami ma shuchaha. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reaction. Do not fear. All of human society must take advantage of this offer and thus be saved by Krishna from the danger of being crushed by the wheel of time, the wheel of past, present, and future. The word nishpidyamanam, being crushed, is very significant. Every living entity in the material condition is actually being crushed again and again, and to be saved from this position, one must take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then one will be happy. The word prapannam is also very significant, for unless one fully surrenders to the Supreme Lord, one cannot be saved from being crushed. A criminal is put in prison and punished by the government, but the same government, if it likes, can release the criminal from imprisoned life. Similarly, we must know conclusively that our material condition of suffering has been allotted to us by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and if we want to be saved from this suffering, we must appeal to the same controller. Thus one can be saved from this material condition. Shri Nishinga Jai Nishinga Jai Jai Nishinga Prahlada Desha Jaya Padma Mukha Padma Vringa. Reflection time. We'll take up to 5 reflections. Kennedy.
Hare Krishna. There were 2 things that really struck me. One of them being that the emphasis on the fact that Krishna doesn't need us to be devotees. He doesn't need anything And yet it is his kindness and his mercy and his choice always to treat us kindly. And even in the second thing ties into that, that even in his most fearsome form, he's so gentle with us. And that even a 5-year-old could approach him, despite being one of the most brilliant 5-year-olds to ever grace our earth. But simply that at every turn, he has always chosen to be merciful with us. And that is who is both the controller, creator, and maintainer of our universe. And so it just makes me feel very held.
Sadhu, sadhu. Bravo, brava. Una más, por favor. Or ache. Mochido. Dozo.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare
He lifts up my
Krishna.
humble obeisance, so Guru Prabhupada. Thank you so much, Prabhu, for the beautiful reading. I like the background of the music, the beautiful verses that you were singing. One reflection I had was the part where Prahlada Maharaj is saying that though Shingadev is so ferocious, he has these ferocious teeth and everything, but Prahlada Maharaj is not afraid of him. And in the purport, Prabhupada gives the analogy of how even though elephant might be so strong outside the water, but in the water they will be swept away with the current of the water. But a tiny little fish, even though a small fish can swim upstream in the water, but because the fish has taken shelter of the water. So that was really powerful to me.
Brilliant analogy, isn't it?
Yes.
So immediately understandable.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Shraddha Devi Dasi.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj, Dandavat Pranam, Jai Shri Prabhupada. Thank you so much for the reading, and I'm just feeling so fortunate that I could get away from my crazy work schedule and attend parts of this. So I was reflecting on what you had read earlier, where it was a simple statement which said that everybody should be very eager to go back to Godhead. But then I was reflecting that what is it that prevents us from having that eagerness to go back? And that's all the attachments that we have here. And in the pastimes, I was reading the pastimes of Vritasura recently, and there, when the demigods, when Indra loses all his opulence because of having killed the Brahmana, Twashta's son and Vishwarupa, at that time they all go and to the Lord, and they want some peace and shelter from the demons, and they're saying, like, give us something so that we are protected. And the Lord, Prabhupada says that he's kind of thinking, he's a little bit disappointed that coming in front of God, they didn't want to go back to Godhead. Instead, they were looking at how we can save ourselves in this and continue in this material world. So I was just thinking about that. Yeah, it is difficult, and it's our attachments that prevent us from having that very strong desire. And Prahlada Maharaj is amazing.
Very practical realization and reflection. Thank you very much, Shraddha Devi Dasi. Well done. Radha Kripa Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, Dandavat Pranam. All gratitude, Prabhupada. Guru Maharaj, I was in the beginning when Prahlada Maharaj mentioned that, even if you are not qualified, then you're still qualified. I was just thinking in the material world, in order to reach to the high, anybody who is, really well settled or, high up in the ladder, you need many qualifications to reach there. And here we are talking about the Supreme who owns everything. And then all our disqualification still is a qualification that we can still approach him. I think that gives us a lot of hope that whatever condition we are in, we are still qualified to approach it. It's not that any incapability which we have, that doesn't apply. We can still approach it. I think that gives a lot of hope for us that I shouldn't be bothered about our inability in whatever way it could be, that still I can approach. So I really felt very happy listening that part.
Thank you very much. Yes, there's a long list of features or qualities that people who are admired may have in this material world. Prahlada Maharaj summarizes them in that list. Manye dana bijana rupa tapasya tojas. But then he says, Bhaktya tu tosha bhagavan gajayutapaya. He remembers Gajendra, who was an elephant. He said, hey, if he can do it, he could please the Lord. Bhaktya tu tosha. Tutosha means that he pleased the Lord through bhakti. Bhaktya tu tosha bhagavan gajayutapaya. And he was the king of the elephants, although he was an animal. And here are all these demigods with beautiful poetry and Sanskrit knowledge. They couldn't satisfy the Lord, but Gajendra did it. So he thought, well, he was sincere. He just tried, even though it may not have been perfect. I mean, how well could an elephant recite prayers? I'd like to hear that recording. But Prahlada Maharaj said the qualification is just to be sincere. And if I sincerely try, then the Lord will be satisfied. Then he gives that very important verse, Viprad Shad Gunayatara Vindana Padara Vinda Vimukashvapasham Varishnam Manyeta Arpita Mano Vajane Hitarta Pranam Punati Sakulam Natabudi Manaha. That even the person who is some highly honored priest because he has all these special Brahminical qualifications, but if they have an aversion to the Lord, just like the Brahmins who were performing sacrifices in the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, when the coward boys came and they said that Krishna and Balaram in the forest, they're hungry, give us something to take to them, for them to eat. And the Brahmins didn't even acknowledge the children. Or we also have at Naimisharanya, when the Ramaharshan was sitting on his high seat, even though he was so qualified, he had received so many teachings from great gurus, and then he didn't recognize Balaram when he came. He didn't even stand up. So one may have so many qualifications, but all these are useless unless one is a sincere devotee of the Lord. And then he says, does Prahlada Maharaj, that a sincere devotee, pure devotee, can purify his whole family, whereas these very puffed up people who have so many material qualifications, they can't even purify themselves. Mm. It seems so perfectly accessible through sincerity. That sounds about right, doesn't it? Okay, last one is from Shreya.
Hare Krishna, Your Grace. So my question was, if all it takes is sincerity for devotional service, and that's all is needed, and then what use is any qualifications?
Well, it's just like zeros. But if you put a 1 in front of the zeros, then the more zeros you have, the more you can use them. So if you have wealth, for instance, it's of no use if you don't use it for Krishna. There's so many buildings in New York City, but if you look from the Bhakti Center at the profile of New York City, it looks like the back of a Gasura. And that's what it is. But the moment you utilize those assets in Krishna's service, you put the 1 in front of it, then it becomes valuable. A person with lots of assets, that is learning, or they have some wealth. We saw when George Harrison, he was very wealthy and extremely famous. Somehow or other, these Beatles, even now, wherever I go in the world, they say Beatles, and they go, yeah, I know the Beatles. So many other, the staying power, somehow Krishna empowered them with some kind of fame. And so, he just, all he did was say, yeah, I'm a devotee. And that helped spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. So everything is Krishna's, and when we utilize it in Krishna's service, then it becomes transformed from material to spiritual. Brahmarpanam brahmahavir, brahmagnav brahmanohutam, brahmaiva tena gantavyam, brahmakarma samadhidam. That's Bhagavad Gita. In the Gita, Krishna says, whatever dravya, material elements, you engage directly in Krishna's service, become transformed from material to spiritual. So if you for offering ghee into the fire for the purpose of satisfying Krishna by feeding him through his tongue in the form of the fire, that ghee is no longer ordinary ghee. It becomes transcendentalized. What to speak of the spoon you're using to offer it? What to speak of the priest who's offering it in there? And everything else that's being engaged. Krishna's using this example. They all become transformed from material to spiritual. So it's not that we reject any material good quality, or we say that material good qualities are even a disqualification, only when they're not engaged in Krishna's service. That's why Prabhupada added to the conversation, the purport, he said, Anasaktasya vishayan yatarham upayunjita nirbandha Krishna sambandhe yuktam vairagyamuchite prapanchikataya buddhya hari sambandhi vasuna mumukshivi parityagyo vairagyam valgukatyate. And that is that everything in the universe is paraphernalia to be used in the service of the Lord. And therefore, real renunciation means to use everything that one has access to in the service of Krishna. And if you have something but you don't engage it in Krishna's service, then this is false renunciation. It's meaningless. It's not yours in the first place to renounce. It's all Krishna's mercy. That's the unique contribution of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the Goswamis. They gave the perfect balanced path, the path of dedication and service, not renunciation and not material enjoyment, but selfless service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, using all paraphernalia in his service. This has been great. It's almost like we need another pandemic. No, I shouldn't say that. It's really good to see everybody. And thanks to Malini for her intense desire to hear Krishna Katha, that she arranged this. Thanks, Malini. Not only does she distribute, but she also wants to hear it constantly. In the old days, not too long ago, we had attempts to read the whole 7th canto during this time of year. So she wanted to revive some of that mood and spirit. I'm glad you did. I see so many devotees from around the world. Chitralekha Saki is here from Australia. So nice to see you there. And there's 54 of us here on Zoom, and maybe a few more following us on YouTube. So now we take a little rest, and we'll come out for Mangalarti tomorrow morning, and we'll have the whole day for doing what we like best, which is just having a festival for the Lord all day long till the wee hours of the night. What do you think? Giriraj Swami will be here for the festivities, and we'll get everyone together for constant hearing and chanting. Dear Srila Prabhupada, dear Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Shri Shri Panchatattva, Shri Shri Gaurnitai, Shri Shri Radha Madan Mohan, Shri Shri Lakshman Shringadev. If you so desire, please dance within our minds as we take a little rest here tonight. And please enliven us to come and worship you all day tomorrow. Thank you for considering our request. Everyone who agrees with this prayer in whole or in part, please unmute and say Hare Krishna.